Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Samir Javed, and today we're live with we'll be sharing the MS project details.
स्ट्रीम ऑफलाइन हुई हुई है स्ट्रीम तो खोलें तो फिर
रिकॉर्डिंग भी करना है। Assalamu alaikum everyone. This is Samir Javed, and today we'll be live streaming MS Project Basic Plan. So before starting, I want to show you this is the eventual project plan that we will be creating by the end of this stream. So the objective of today's session is to help in creating basic project plan and understanding basic features and functions of MS Project that will help you in creating project plans in the future. So over here you can see on the screen is the eventual resulting project plan that we'll be creating today, and we'll start off with a blank project plan. So let's move on to there. I have a blank project plan over here in place. So just to show everyone, once you start MS Project or open MS Project in your system, you can initiate a new project plan. It has some templates, but start off with the blank project plan, just I've done right now. And first of all, the most important thing in the project plan is to define your project start date. So let's move on to the task over here. We go to the project ribbon over here. You click on the project information. So this is where you define your project details. So before, whenever you're creating a project plan, you need to understand what's your project start date or what's your finish date. There are two options that MS Project helps you in aligning the project details. The first one is defining your project start date. Let's say I define 1st January as my project start date. This is showing me the current date. If I want to specify a project status date, I can define it over here. Also, MS Project allows you to schedule from or whether the start date or end date. Usually, if you have a certain deadline to meet, then you start the project and create a project plan based on the project finish date. So you backtrack your tasks based on that. So MS Project will create the durations and align the dates as per your finish date by keeping your initial dates by changing your initial dates and keeping the finish date constant. So in usual practice, it's the project start date because the primary objective of using MS Project is to plan your work before it is done. So first we plan, we schedule, and then we execute the actual project. So we usually use the project start date. So we assume that we are creating a project plan in for a project that will be done in the future. So keeping that in view, we've defined our start date as 1st January 2021, and over here I specify the standard calendar to be used for the entire project. And also over here it gives me an option that whenever I'm creating a task, I can assign it a certain priority. So if a few tasks have a higher priority, I can raise that as we go along. However, the usual standard is 500, which MS Project specifies in default. So I click OK. And one more important thing before doing anything else is to save your project. Okay, so in case if anything goes wrong, you have your data saved and it's there in place. Okay, the first thing we did was to create a project information, define the project information in the project information properties. The next thing to do in the project plan as best practice is to define your working times. What does this mean? This actually means that you define your off days in the calendar. So whenever MS Project is scheduling the work, you you know what are the off days which are not going to be included as working days, because by default MS Project in a standard calendar considers Saturday Sundays as off days. So any work defined or any duration defined will be considered between Monday to Friday. So you can adjust your working days based on your region, based on your areas, and also you can then define your public holidays as per your given region, so that those are taken into account while scheduling the project. Over here, let's say I define some exceptions in the project. For example, I define 8th of January. Over here we're in January as a public holiday. The easier way is to select a start and finish date. If you click on details, you'll be given more options over here. So let's go through that. First thing it's asking me is this exception. Before we move forward, let me explain that these are considered as exceptions. So these can consider your holidays, your off days, or if there are some days where you have limited work hours due to any reason, you can define them over here as well. So it's asking me, what kind of exception is this? Is it a non-working day or is it a working day? However, it has some limited time. Some cases where you'll need to reduce your usual 8 hours of work from 8 to maybe 6 or 4 hours, depending of any restrictions applied due to any certain situation in the city or whatever. So you can reduce your default 8 hours of work into a lesser time, or you can increase that as well. So since we are defining it as a public holiday, let me change it to non-working days. Then it will ask me what's the recurrence pattern, which would mean that is it a daily task that will be done? Will it be repeated weekly? Will it be repeated monthly? Or will it be repeated yearly? Let's say I define it that this is a yearly repetitive public holiday. So it's as soon as I click it, it will give me a few options. It says that when will be repeated. I say it will always repeat on 6th January. You can also define it as it will always repeat in the first Wednesday of January. So you have some holidays that are certain, that are bound to the first weekend of a certain month. For example, you have Easter, you have obviously Christmas is fixed on a date. So some days are bound on certain days of the month, so you can specify those as well. So let's now we'll define this hypothetical public holiday as January 6th. Then in the lower end, we can see that it shows that from which date this public holiday will be considered as part of the project scheduling. So for my project, it's the very start of January, and I can define it whether if I want, keeping in view that my project is, for example, it's not gonna take more than a few months. I can define it for a max of 1 year, one occurrence. One occurrence means that it will only be applicable for 1 year. You can also see this disabled value over here. As soon as I change this, you can also see that it keeps changing below. So if I am creating a project plan which can span into multiple years, depending on what kind of project I'm doing, I can define it over here. For now, I'll just keep it as one, since I'm creating a very limited and small project plan. So it will only consider this holiday for this year. If I make it, it will also consider it for the next year. So if my project plan spills over to the next year, it will automatically adjust this day as a public holiday for the next year as well. So as you can see over here in the calendar, it has marked that day as a working holiday, and it has specified its detail as well. So whenever MS Project will be scheduling any work, it will consider this day as an off day, and will not count it in whenever it is aligning the durations. I click OK. Before clicking OK, if you see the options over here, this is where you define your what are the parameters of your project scheduling. So it's saying that my week starts on Sunday, my fiscal year starts in January, and my default start time is 8 a.m. Let's say I define it as 9, and default end time is 5 or 6, depending on how many hours I work. And I specify what are the working hours per day, how many hours to be considered as work hours per week, and what are the work hours per day per month. Then over here you can see whenever I'm creating new tasks, it's considered as manual scheduled. I'll change it to auto scheduled. This will help me in whenever I insert a new task, it will automatically schedule it as per the project start date unless I define any dependency along with it. And it's asking me what are the durations entered in. By default it stays, but you can, if you have a very small project plan that's covering minutes of work, so you can specify it in minutes, hours as well. Or if you have a longer and a larger project, you can define the task in weeks and months. In default project plans, it's kept as days, so let's keep that as well. And work is considered in hours, minutes, days, weeks. This also depends on the magnitude of project you're working on. And default task type basically defines what are the uh, constraints that you want to assign to each task. So when your task is duration driven, that means that your durations will drive the entire project plan. That's where you define fixed duration. Whatever duration defined to a task, that's the main driving force of the scheduling. If you define it as fixed units, that means that you have fixed number of units or fixed number of resources that need to be considered while aligning the project. So that's what MS Project keeps under construction while assigning any dates or scheduling any dates for a task. And same goes for the fixed work. Fixed work means that if it's going beyond 8 hours, it will stretch it forward. So let's keep it at fixed duration. And I've kept the calculation on. So whenever I do any changes, I don't have to specifically press the calculate button way up over here. Instead, MS Project will do the calculation instantly as soon as I do the changes in the plan. So I click OK. So we have our calendar defined. So let's start off by creating our very first project task. I hop back to the task ribbon, and over here I define a task. Okay. As soon as I press enter, you can see it has automatically scheduled it to the day of start of the project date. And over here, you can see the duration is marked with a question mark. So this is MS Project assuming that this is the estimated time frame or estimated duration. So let's first double click on this. You can see it has an estimated check mark against it. I'm not going to do anything with this because I'm just mentioning this task as being a summary task. So I'll explain what does a summary task mean as we move forward. Task A. Okay. So I'm just simply creating a few tasks. Okay. Now I want these tasks to be summarized under summary task 1. So what I'll do is I'll select these tasks, go over to the scheduling section over here, and intend the task forward. So it becomes a subtask of the summary task 1. There we go. Next, what I'll do, I'll select summary task 1 and make it part of my project name. Okay, that's a it's not a necessity to do this way. This is just a good practice, and it helps you in rolling up and rolling down the you know your task. If you have a larger project plan, this will help you in easily summarizing your timelines and understanding what's going on. Over here I define the duration of task 1. I can define it over here, but let's go in a more proper way. I'll double click on this task. Over here I can see the task information dialog box. This explains or specifies the task name, and I want this duration to be, let's say, 4 days. As soon as I change the duration, you can see the check mark on estimated has gone away by itself. So if you, until unless you specify a date or a duration by yourself, MS Project will keep that question mark in place, so you know that there's something that needs to be updated. Or if you also want to keep it as estimated, you will just check mark again. So if you're sure that your duration is fixed on this duration that you have defined, you just keep that unchecked. Next, we have the percentage complete over here. So in case this will help whenever you're updating the project details. So you can specify if a certain task has reached a certain level of completion. So you can change the percentage over here. Since we're starting off, we'll keep it at 0. Priority, we'll keep it at default. The scheduling mode is auto scheduled, and inactive will mean that if you mark this, your project or the task that you're working on will not be considered in the eventual project scheduling date. So it will skip this task whenever it's scheduling or calculating the project. I'll uncheck this again. It's showing me the start and end date. It will auto schedule this once I click OK, so I'll leave it at that. And it's also showing me 3 checkboxes over here. So it's asking me whether I want to display it on timeline. So by timeline, MS Project means this bar that you can see over here is marking the duration of the project. For now, it's from first to first, since we haven't defined any dependencies or finish dates yet. As we increase the project time frame, it will keep increasing the details. So this is my very first task of the project plan. So it doesn't have any dependencies. However, if you have a certain dependency, even before starting the project, you can define it in the plan and then specify it over here. We'll be defining these details as we create next upcoming tasks. Okay, by resources, it's asking me what are the resource names that are going to work on this. We'll get to this shortly. Advanced tab basically shows more details of the task. It will ask you if there are any constraints on this task. By constraints, it means that are there any limitations or considerations that we need to keep in check. If there's a certain deadline that needs to be applied on this project or on this task, sorry, you can if you have a deadline for for this certain task, you can select it over here, and it will consider that, and if it's conflicting with any other dependency or any other scheduling, it will intimate you immediately. Then we have the constraint type. Constraint type means basically the task that you're scheduling. Should MS project consider it as to be executed as soon as possible, or as late as possible? Finish no earlier than means that whenever you specify it as this, then you have to specify a date, constraint date over here. That's where it will ensure that this particular task should not finish earlier than the specified date. If it's finishing earlier, then it will move the start date to the date where the finish date matches the constraint date. And same goes with no later than. That will mean that if it's going beyond the finish date, then it will move the start date a bit back, so it ensures that it's not finishing after the specified constraint date. Must finish on, which will ensure that the finish date is constant, and must start on will ensure that your start date is constant. So by default, every task is specified as soon as possible. That will mean that MS project should calculate the start date of that task to start as soon as possible. If there has no dependency and there is no consideration or constraint deadline defined, it consider the start date as the project start date, unless there is a dependency which is defined against it. We have created the project task by default in fixed duration, as we specified in the options over there. Calendar, since the entire project plan has been assigned a standard calendar, so in case you have a certain task that is following a different calendar, you can also specify that, so it will override the scheduling of the standard calendar. And over here you can see the work breakdown code, WBS code of this particular task. So it can help you in giving an identity to each task. We can also show it in the main window. I'll just do it as soon as I start doing the changes over there. In the Notes tab, you can add additional details related to this task. If there's something that you need to specify or mention related to the task, then you can also specify it over here. So you see, as soon as I click OK, it depends. The dependencies, since they're not there at the moment, it initially assigns the task finish date as 7. And let me also add the WBS code over here by right clicking on the column. I'll insert. Let me do that again. I'll insert this over here and select WBS. So this will show you what's your basic structure of the flow of the MS project plan that you're creating, and what are the nodes that you're referring to. You can easily refer, if you're cross-referring it to your colleague or anyone or your customers, you can simply point out that you please go to WBS 1.1.2, and these are the details mentioned, so it's easier to cross-refer. So for now, I'm stating that task 2. Let's move on to task number 2. Let me rename them as numbers, so it will be easier. As you can see, what I'm trying to show you here is you can edit the task using multiple methods. Either you can edit it over here. The short key for doing this is by clicking the cell twice, or you can come to the cell and press F2. It will also take you into edit mode, or you can go to the cell and come up over here and mention it over here. Okay, now I'm going to assign task 2 a dependency of task 1. Over here you can see the first rows on the very left are showing a number. This number basically specifies the ID of each task. I'll press 4 and immediately, sorry, this is its own task name. So I specify 3. So it immediately pulls up the task 1 name as a dependency over here. Then I select the type of dependency that this task will have with task 1. So what does this mean? This actually means that task 2 will start after finishing of start of task 1. So once task 1 is finished, then only task 2 will start off. Second option is start to start. This will mean that when task 1 is finished, only then task 2 start to start will mean that both tasks will start at the same time. Finish to finish will mean that both tasks will finish at the same time. And when we put it start to finish, that means that task 1 and task 2 will have a start and finish date defined accordingly. So we'll define it finish to start. And also update the duration over here. Instead, I'll show you another way of updating it. You can update it over here directly. Similarly, we do the same thing for task number 3. We define task 3 being dependent on task 4 on task number 2, which has an ID of 4, also with the finish to start date. We update the duration over here as well. Over here, you can see now the overall project timeline has gone on to 14 working days, and you can see the start and end dates over here. One important thing is basically I want to show that what are my main tasks on the timeline. So, for example, you remember that we had an option over here. As soon as I click it, it will show this in the timeline, and it's showing that the task 1 is starting off from 1st of January and ending somewhere on 7th. Now, also keep in consideration that these 4 days are skipping the Saturday, Sundays. So Friday is the first working day. Then remember we marked the 6th of January as an off day. So Friday is the first day, Monday is the second day, Tuesday or the 3rd of January is the third day, Then Wednesday is the fourth day. Wednesday is considered as an off day. So we have it will skip that and count Thursday as a fourth day. So that's why the actual number of days is going up to five, but actually it's 4 working days. So this is something I wanted to tell you, that MS Project always consider to schedule work or calculate any task based on the number of working days falling under those days. So let's repeat one more thing. Let's create another summary task. I'll let you know why I'm doing this. Okay, I want this task to be outside of the summary task one. So I select this task and intend out. And then we create a few more tasks over here. Okay, if you notice, I have created another task with the name Project Milestone. And I'll show you why I did this. First, let me move all these tasks under task 2. Assign the durations of each task. Okay, now let's work out a few things and define the task types over here. Now I want a parallel. For example, if you want to define parallel execution of project, parallel execution of your tasks, so you can define them as dependent on each other. For example, I want task 1 and task 4 to start at the same time. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll specify the task ID of task 1, which is 3, and I'll change the type from start to start. Another box you can see over here is lag. Lag means that if you want, depending on the dependency that you have defined over here. So let me do one more interesting thing. So I want task 1 to be task 4 to start after with the same date as start 1 task 1. However, instead of starting on the same date, I wanted to start with a lag of, let's say, 2 days. I click it, I increase the lag to 2 days. So what I'll do, it will keep the dependency on start to start, and then it will change the start date with a lag of 2. You can see over here that it changes the start date to 5 instead of 1. Similarly, I define the dependency of the next task. There's another way of doing it. I simply, instead of double clicking and entering it in there, I can specify it over here as well. So I specify 7, which is the task ID for task number 4. And then I specify 8 for this and 9 for this. Okay. One more thing I need to show you, that if I double click on this task right now, there are two ways. I want to mark this task as a milestone for my project. I'm considering it as a completion of my this short project plan. So if I there are two ways of doing it. Either I double click on it, go to the advanced tab, and mark task as milestone, and it will be marked as a milestone of the project. Okay, and I'll also add this to display on timeline so you can view it over here. Okay, right now, since I haven't defined any dependencies, before doing that, let me tell you how else it will be marked as a milestone. If I don't show it over here, and instead I define the duration as 0, it will automatically consider it as a milestone, as you can see it over here. Now what I'll do is I consider this as a project milestone. Now this project milestone will be achieved when all of the summary task 1 and summary task 2 have completed. So summary task 1 has a ID of 2. I specify 2, comma, and 6. Immediately, the task's duration has changed. Its duration is 0 days. However, its start and end date changed to 21. Now, first it goes to the task summary task one's duration or finish date. That's 21. It also considers the duration of summary task 2. So whichever is higher, the milestone immediately changes to that. If you double click, you can see it in the predecessors that both dependencies are defined as finished to start. As soon as task 1, summary task 1 and summary task 2 are finished, only then this start will be considered as a start date for this milestone. Since for me this is the project completion, so this is where it will be marked as a completion. So if you can see, it has moved the project milestone over here. It's shown as a diamond on the project plan. And if you want to see your project tracking chart, you can click it over here. You go to the very end of your project screen. As soon as you see a double crossbow over here, you select it and drag it to the area you want, and you can see it over here as well. So you can see the project's durations going on, the tasks which are dependent on each other and how they're progressing. And in the end, you see that they're merging into a milestone over here, which is also shown as a diamond on the project tracking chart. Just for everyone's understanding, the area on this left, you can see that this is considered or called a Gantt chart, where you specify your project schedule and things dependent on your project. And on the right hand side, this is called the project tracking Gantt chart. We'll also show a few more things related to resources. Now we have defined the tasks and their dependencies over here. Let's move on to the resources. In the upper corner, you can see the Gantt chart written over here. If you click the drop down over here, it will show you a few more things. So over here, you go to the resource sheet. This is where you define your project resources. So let's create a new resource. There are again multiple ways. Either you can uh, click on the cell over here and edit it over here as well. or another way is to double click it and it will open the resource information dialog box. So I specify the resource name, define the initials, and specify the email address as well. I say that this resource belongs to RA group. I can specify a code. For example, you can specify your employee code over here, for example, if you have one. And over here, the booking type is basically either committed. Committed means whenever you're using this resource, it's considered to be fully committed on the specified timelines, or you can specify it as proposed, which will mean that this is the proposed timelines and could change. So it's not, it doesn't strictly bound the resource times over here. Another interesting option over here is the type. So, for example, work resource means personnel that are working on the project, so which are defined as work resource. Then we have material resource. Material resources are basically your equipment or your material that you're requiring. For example, if you're creating a project plan for construction or things like that require physical material as part of the project, you can define those resources as well. And if any task is dependent on those material resources, you can specify it over here. If you can click it over here, view the material label and things like that, and immediately takes away the email part. I'll change it back to work as well. Then we have the cost resource type. So there are three types of resources: work resource, which are the personnel; material resources are the equipment or physical entities that are part of the project or that are to be utilized during the project; and then cost resource are basically are uh, any any cost effect any resource that are costing during the course of the project. Define the email back again. Just to understand the use of email is basically if your project plan is linked with your active directory of your company, then it will immediately shoot out an email to your resource. We have the cost tab. This is where you define your company's or your resources rates for this resource. So I specify, by default it has a 0 in place. So over here I want to specify that you can specify that a certain resource can have a certain rate. By default, it's the first line shows you a default rate, so that would mean that you can define the rate over here. For example, my resource costs $10 per hour on a standard rate, and if I specify the overtime rate. That would be $15 per hour. And if I'm using per use cost benefit analysis, I'll specify that per use would be also $10. Per use can also mean that you're using resource. For example, if you're calculating it per day, so the number of times you're using that resource, it will cost you a certain amount of money. Also, you can specify that a resource can have different rates on certain dates. For example, if you have contractual people working on you based on project basis, you can specify the dates they are engaged with you and what are the rates during those rates. You can specify the nodes specific to the resource over here. Click OK. So I create a couple of resources. Let me also show you another way of adding details to the resource. You click on the resource tab over here and you click on the information tab. So it opens the same thing that we opened earlier. Or you can also consider, or you select the details tab over here. So you have a short form over here. So in case I want to define specific details related to project resources, I mention it over here. Let me define the same things for as we did for resource one. We specify them as we did for the other resource. Right now you see that these are not showing any details. That's because we haven't aligned or specified any resource uh, to them. I specify this. I'll tell you why I'm doing this, so you can show you something. You can see that there's a small box coming over here. That's why it basically, since my current system is not connected with the Active Directory, it's not showing me any notifications over here. Else, if you are working in an enterprise environment and your system is linked with your Active Directory, so it will show you the availability of this resource as green, yellow, or red, but depending on what information is available with the system. So that's a very interesting way of scheduling your resource, because you'll know that whether when you're considering or entering this resource name in your plans, you will know that whether this resource is available or not. So you saw that whenever when I haven't entered any email address against this resource, it was not showing this particular notification over here with it. So let me define a new resource as well and show you a new way of entering the resource details. A resource C, it's not a material resource. I'll give it initials as RC group, or it can belong to the same group as RA. Another way, if you have multiple resource following the same standard rates, you just select the one on top, click on the lower small box over here. As soon as you see a crossbow over here, across here, as you drag it down, and it will be copied to the remaining resources, just like you do in MS Excel. Okay, so you see I haven't entered any email address for this resource, hence it's not showing me any details over here. So what I can do is I can to ease my work, I can select a new column over here. There you go. And I mention resource.c at me.com, and there we have it. You see, it immediately updates us resource D, RD, and I can copy the same over here. So pretty much everything is similar to what we use in MS Excel, where we're using cells over there. Resource.d, and there we go. So what we just did is basically we define the resources of our project, and let's close this. Now the next step is to assign these resources to our project tasks. So let's go back to the Gantt chart. Now there are two ways again to specify the resources. I'll show you each way for each task. First way, I'll double click the task, the resources tab, select the drop down, select the resource, and the number of units is 1. Cost is already there, so it will automatically assign that details for that resource. Similarly, I use another method of showing you. As soon as you click on the resource cell over here, the drop down available where you have all the resources defined. I'll select resource B for this task. Also, you can assign multiple resources for each task. Let me just show you over here. It's gonna show the number of resources for each task that are defined in the project plan. So let me do this for the remaining task as well, and also show you a few more things that we'll see what it's doing. Okay, if you notice that I defined resource A, as soon as I defined resource A over here, it gave me a notification over here, which is showing me that this task has over allocated resources. Now, what does that mean? That actually means that this particular resource is over allocated, means that this resource is already working on a certain task before, which is falling in the same timeline. So how you can address that? First thing is to see how your work is being distributed. So we go to the resource tab, go to the resource usage, and over here any resource that is falling beyond its working hours is going to be highlighted in red. So as you can see, the resource A has a total of 80 working hours, and those breakups are being shown over here. In total, it's showing that resource A has 8 hours of work on Friday, 8 hours of work on Monday, 8 hours of work on Tuesday. Since Wednesday is an off day, so no work is scheduled over here. However, this resource is going beyond its allocated 8 hours of work on Thursday. Friday again is okay with 8 hours. So you can see that resource A has 8 hours of work from Friday to the next Monday, the January 11th. However, on Thursday, it's over allocated with another 8 hours of work, which is related to task 5. MS project will offer you a resolution for this. See, if you want to resolve this issue, it's showing you the details. If you double click it, why is it showing you? Before we correct this, let's go and look over to the remaining resources. As you can see, those are not highlighted. The reason is because they're doing their work. They're also doing, for example, resource B is also doing 80 hours of work, but that work is distributed in 8 hours shifts on each of the days. As you can see over here, each day is showing 8 hours, and same is the case for resource C and D. So how can we fix this? You see, I click on the team planner and it will show you a calendar view of the resources, and over here it's also highlighting that this is the area which is overlapping for resource A. So let's jump back to the Gantt chart. MS project is saying right click for options, so let's right click. So it's giving you multiple options. First is to fix this in Task Inspector. We'll go there just right now. And the other way is it's offering you to reschedule the task to another available date when resource A is free. So what it'll do is it will move the start date to the availability of the resource A. So you can have resource A work if it's an essential part, or resource A's involvement is very essential to this task. So you either reschedule the dates of the task, or you assign someone to take over resource A's work. So this option will not take you to the task inspector and immediately change the task date. As you can see, as soon as I select it, it moves the date 1 day forward, while also keeping other resources in this project under consideration. Let me change that back. And the third option is to ignore problems for this task. So this means that I know that this resource is over allocated. It will be doing an overtime of 8 hours on this day. So I'll ignore this. So this notification will go away. So let us go into the task inspector and see what it shows. There you have it. So it again offers you the same options to move the task to resources next available time, or view the over allocated resources in the plan, and then you can see if you can reduce the work hours. There's another way of doing it. Let's take the second route. I'll go to the resource usage form, and I'd say that this resource is going to work. This resource is going to work on both tasks. However, it will not spend 8 hours on task 1. Instead, it will spend 4 hours. Okay? And the remaining 4 hours will be spent on task 5. This is how you specify resources to your project plans. So if you can see over here, you can see the entire project, task with their resources, and the milestone that is defined alongside with it. So there we have it, folks. We have our basic project plan created. We covered project scheduling. We covered project calendar specification. We covered how to define resources. We also covered resource work for a particular